presented by the FFPC. I am your host, Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. The trade deadline is no longer a part of our fantasy season. We're reacting to it, and who better to react to it with you than the godfather of not only the FFPC Pros versus Joes, but the godfather of all things stats-wise when it comes to ownership, draft boards, ADP, stacks, probably 100 things else I'm forgetting at fantasymojo.com. He is Fantasy Mojo, and he is Darren Armani, my co-host for the next 2 hours. Darren, welcome in, man.
Hey, thanks, Balky. It's good to talk to you. I don't think we even spoke out in Vegas. You were busy doing better sports out there too the whole time.
I was, yeah. Kyle Elfrink and I did, I think about 11 hours of radio out there, which I think was a record for me over the course of 3 days. I was like, I told Kyle privately off air, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fill, we're going to be able to fill all this content or all these hours with content. And then shockingly enough, just like all my friends and my wife say, boy, that Balky likes to talk, and the time just flew by. And Kyle's a pro, he's a legend. So it was great doing it with him. You know what's funny? And I think I brought this up with you because you've been on my other shows before. And I feel like I brought this up with you. This is like the third year in a row. I feel like I have had like 24 people come up to me and say, hey, Balky, where's Darren Armani? Where's Fantasy Mojo? I got to meet this guy. I got to buy him a drink. Everybody always wants to talk with you out there. And I think like people don't understand. I want to give you an opportunity to tell everybody who you are and what you do. But there are so many successful high stakes players, and even people like just casual players. It's like you sign up for the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and then you get your account at Fantasy Mojo. It's like a part. It's not like, I mean, it is a partnership, but like for the players, it's like a must have on both ends, because you don't want to hamstring yourself and stop yourself short of fantasy greatness by playing in the FFPC, but not having a Fantasy Mojo account. I'm going to give you this opportunity. FantasyMojo.com. Tell the listeners what it's about and why FFPC players simply have to have a membership to your website.
So I consider it's the essential add-on to any FFPC player, because we will, and mostly during the draft season is when we get most of the traffic. I mean, we literally have every board drafted online available on the website. We have up-to-date ADP, time sensitive with from the night before, like the ADP is real time. Every morning it gets run, it gets regenerated. So you're always dealing with the freshest ADP. We've got stack explorers. We got different tools that show you, like, as far as the tournaments, like which teams have the unique combinations of players. I mean, it's just from A to Z. It's everything FFPC related. There's a virtual tour on the front page that anybody can go to and see all of the things that we offer. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder, like, if I disappeared, people wouldn't know what to do. Like, how are they going to function without that data there every day? It's like it's the archives. It's really it is the archives of the FFPC. And I'll tell you, high stakes players from other sites as well subscribe, because it's the group think of the high stakes mind. These are the guys, they're the sharpest players, and they're in there drafting every day. So it doesn't matter if it's FFPC or, NFFC or FFWC. A lot of those guys want to see the data as well, because it's considered very, very valuable, especially during draft season.
I have people that over the last couple of years that never played in the FFPC or just high stakes fantasy football in general. And they've been very successful in their home leagues, their office leagues, their family leagues, whatever. And then they come over to the FFPC. And I always say, and Alex Kaganovsky, FFPC co-founder, always says this, like the jump from, your normal leagues to high stakes leagues, it's not as big of a leap as you might think. But I think the great equalizer for anybody who is fresh into the high stakes landscape is to sign up for a membership at fantasymojo.com. And then all of a sudden you're on the level playing field, because now you have detailed analysis, whether you want the averages of how players are being drafted, how players are being bid on. you can actually have you can look at individual leagues and look at the boards in the FFPC main event, the Football Guys Players Championship, how the bids are going on tonight, which I think we'll get into in the second hour. We'll talk a little bit about that and with how the high stakes waivers ended up. But I think that's really important. FantasyMojo.com, at FantasyMojo on Twitter, a must follow. And I got to be honest with you, Darren, you probably already know this. A lot of the content that I use for my shows comes directly from your website. So if you ever went away, it would probably triple the workload I have to put in to my show. So please don't do that. Coming up on tonight's show, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to talk everything NFL trade deadline, a lot of fallout from that. How do you handle it for fantasy? Not only with lineup setting in week 9 in the Buy-Mageddon, the Buy-Pocalypse, but also what you're doing with the waiver wire leading up until those games start. We're going to do starter sits throughout the program. We're going to take a look at the Thursday night football game tomorrow. It's going to be exciting because we have Darren, a noted Eagles fan, helping to preview this game in Houston against the Texans. And shout out to Tyler Soto, our producer tonight, and Sean Engel, by the way. Tyler is in Houston. Not only do we have a Philadelphia-Houston Thursday night football game, we got a Philadelphia-Houston World Series game tonight, which at last check, Houston is up 5-0, this close to knotting the World Series up at 2 games apiece. So we'll get into that in before we shift over to the second hour. The first segment of the second hour, we're going to get into a little bit of the wide receiver situations for the Chargers and the Packers. We're going to talk a little bit about Foster Moreau and Darren Waller and the Bengals situation. What a debacle that was on Halloween night. All tricks, no treats for the Bengals against Cleveland. And then the last segment, I was talking about the FFPC Weekly Challenge. I formulated my own lineup for this. Darren's going to break it down. He's going to pick it apart. He's going to tell me why it's terrible. And I'm going to tell him why I agree with them because he's super smart and looks at all this kind of stuff. And by the way, if you want to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge, myffpc.com, you can enter for $35 or $200. In fact, if you want to play in the 10-team league for $200, you beat those 9 other players, you get a free entry into the 2023 FFPC main event where you can play for a $1 million grand prize. It's super simple. There's no drafts. There's no salary cap. You just pick a standard FFPC lineup. If you want to do the slims without the kickers and defenses, you can do that. You can also do a 12-team lineup as well with kickers and defenses. It's totally up to you. We will get into my team coming up later on in the program. Download the Bettor Sports Network app now, ladies and gentlemen. This is why you want to do it. You can be a part of all the live talk shows. You want to ask Darren Armani a question right away, boom, hit the button and you're in. We'll put you on. You can ask your question. You can chat with us as well. You can enter all the contests just with the push of the button. And the best part is it's not $9.99 in the App Store. It is not $4.99 at Google Play. It is free in both stores right now. So invite your family and your friends to be a part of our community that is growing. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback, a lot of new listeners, a lot of new viewers coming on to the Bettor Sports Network and checking out everything we have. Tons of shows throughout the day here. So download that in the App Store right now, the Bettor Sports Network app. All right, without further ado, let's get into the content. We had a blockbuster trade, including, and we'll center this on the fantasy aspect of it. Obviously, Dolphins fans are excited about getting a talented pass rusher in Bradley Chubb going to the Dolphins. But Jeff Wilson also leaving the San Francisco 49ers to go to Miami. Now, this is exciting for me, Darren. And our mutual friend, Farrell Elliott, who co-hosts the High Stakes Fantasy Footballer with me, always been a massive Raheem Mostert fan. Hey, listen, I like Raheem Mostert, but the fact of the matter is he is a ticking time bomb, okay? He just cannot stay healthy anymore for a full season. So when he does go down, obviously with no Chase Edmonds in Miami now, I think cue Jeff Wilson. I think a lot of people already had him because they didn't drop him after the McCaffrey trade. And I didn't look at the numbers, and I probably should have done this before the show. But I think Jeff Wilson is a must-hold right now because I think there is going to be 1 or 2 weeks before the end of the season where Wilson is the lead back in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. It seems the San Francisco 49er running backs, that's Miami is the place where they end up eventually, isn't it?
Because of Mike McDaniel. I would assume Mike McDaniel is a huge reason for that.
Right. But honestly, I don't. It's tough to get excited about Miami running backs. It seems like it's a recycle bin of somebody like emerges. They have some decent weeks. They never have like really huge weeks though. They're decent flex players. but then, like you said, somebody gets hurt, and then the next guy, they have depth there for a reason. It's almost like they know what's going to happen. But Jeff Wilson, I'm surprised he like stayed healthy for 3-4 games in San Francisco, because he's got a history of getting injured as well. So, but it's a nice tandem for them to have. It's not like it doesn't move the needle much for me. But they're depth pieces for the most part. So that's all I got to say about those guys.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, Wilson's never been the pinnacle of health, and quite frankly, I know this: if Mostert were to go down, FFPC owners, Football Guys owners would be scrambling to pick up the guy behind the guy, right? And so immediately, people, as little of faith as I have in Mostert staying healthy for a long period of time, it's pretty close to having almost no faith in Jeff Wilson for doing the same thing. So I think that's the case right there. You roster him, you hope to use him for a couple of weeks, but expecting anything more than that, I think is a mistake. Calvin Ridley, this is an interesting one. So he goes to Jacksonville. Now, a couple of other people that I was listening to talked about the Jaguars jumping the route essentially and getting Calvin Ridley ahead of, when other people would be interested in him, given that, or other teams would be interested in him, given that he's going to be suspended through the rest of the season, right? I look at it from the standpoint of he might be a roster clogger, especially in I mean, obviously you're not rostering him in redraft leagues, but he might be a roster clogger for Dynasty. And what I mean is, this is going to be a guy who's going to be almost 2 years removed from football. This is a guy who already came into the NFL older than a lot of the other players in his draft. And I wonder, given Christian Kirk's connection with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, I almost wonder, Darren, that if you pick up Ridley or trade for him and you have him on your dynasty roster, I don't know if he's ever going to pay off to the extent that I think a lot of people will. And I'm very bearish on Calvin Ridley in dynasty leagues, even with this new opportunity in Jacksonville.
I kind of like it because he's going from we've seen the Atlanta offense kind of deteriorate as far as the passing goes, and then you've got Pitts ascending there. So Ridley wasn't going to step back into that massive target share that he had when he was active. So if he goes to Jacksonville, I think that's a better situation. Doug Peterson, the guy knows how to run an offense, and he'll certainly make use of Calvin Ridley. I'm not as concerned as you are about him, a 2-year layoff. I think he'll get it back pretty quickly. I think that's a better spot for him than to come back to Atlanta and try and fit back into that offense. So I kind of like it. Now, I don't do as much dynasty as you do. In FFPC, is he how is he treated? Is he on the IR, or is he literally a roster clogger on an active roster?
No, he can be IR'd. What I'm
okay.
and I was a little bit nebulous when I said roster clogger. I think that even when rosters expand next season, and it doesn't matter then, because you can clog your rosters with whatever you want. You can expand up to whatever. But the issue for me is, once you do have to cut down before the start of the season, again, we'll have some training camp reports on him. We'll have some preseason knowledge on him, and how that relates to the start of the season, I don't know. But if he gets off to a slow start in 2023, the people that will have him, it's like our mutual friend Ron Meyer at @2Packer on Twitter always says, the endowment effect, right? That if you have Calvin Ridley on your roster, you're going to expect more from him than the other 11 teams in your league. That's just human nature. That's how our minds work. And then he is clogging your roster. You're waiting for this big breakout, and I don't know if it's going to happen. Now, to your point, I happen to agree with you. I think this is a better situation for him. We have seen, for whatever reason, Arthur Smith likes to win football games without utilizing his best players on offense, and that's Kyle Pitts and that's Drake London. I think that it stands to be a pretty reasonable assumption that when Ridley got back, a guy that Arthur Smith had nothing to do with as far as drafting, that he might fall to that same fate, right? And if he does, what are you doing with him in Atlanta? Now, Jacksonville, I don't think is going to make that same mistake. Yes, Christian Kirk is probably going to be the number one, but I think Evan Engram does not have the same talent, or certainly the upside that Kyle Pitts does. And there might be a better opportunity for him there to put up better numbers than he would in Atlanta. That part I agree with you with. The thing is with me is I just, and I know you're not as concerned with it. The long layoff is a big deal to me. This is a guy that, again, doesn't have a whole lot of miles on his legs, but he's a little bit more aged than some of the other receivers are. Now for dynasty, that's a bigger deal than redraft. And maybe it's nothing, and maybe I'm totally wrong. God knows I've done it to an almost bodily function level of being wrong in fantasy football. But that's how I feel about Calvin Ridley.
I bet you
Buffalo
he
Bills.
goes
Go
fifth,
ahead.
sixth round. I bet you he goes fifth, sixth round next year in
Next
draft.
year in redraft, okay.
Yeah.
And so if that is the case, Darren, and you are the draft expert here on this of where all these players, you've seen all these players go, where does Christian Kirk go in your estimation if he continues this crescendo that he's on right now?
I think and Kirk's kind of cooled off a little bit.
Yes.
And he came out of the gate hot, but actually Evan Engram's out targeted him the past 4 weeks. So I think it's going to be like a 1A, 1B situation. Like you see a lot of receivers. I'm trying to think of so we get some receiver combos that sort of go into the same range, like in the 4th, 5th round. Like last year, it was like Kupp and Robert Woods last year, where they kind of like one went in front of the other on varying drafts. So I think it's going to be like that because Kirk, I don't think is an elite option. So I think the jury's going to be out and people are going to have their preference and they might just sort of, take turns going ahead of each other in drafts next year.
Yeah. And the other great thing about this, speaking of roster cloggers, if Kirk does go there, or if Ridley does go there and Kirk's similar, we will no longer have to keep up with the Joneses, meaning Zay and Marvin, because they will be irrelevant in this offense. Thank God.
Yeah.
Lord knows
they're almost irrelevant now.
Yeah. You know what's funny about that is like I don't know what it was like submitting waivers. Well, let me ask you this: 6 teams on bye, Darren. Is it easier or harder to submit waivers on a week like this? I thought it was going to be super difficult, but then I looked out on the waiver wire compared to what I had on my bench, and it was pretty easy. Like there wasn't a whole lot out there, and I'm ready to go with my depth that I have for my week 9 lineups rather than dumpster diving on the waiver wire.
Yeah, I mean, the options are limited, so it's kind of like when you watch TV and there was only like 6 channels to choose from. It made choosing a program easier, but what the quality of what you're going to get is not going to be great. So in most cases this week, you're not going to be picking up something usable. So there's probably something like the lowest option on your bench is almost equivalent to what you're going to snag off the waiver wire. And a lot of there's a couple guys out there. And maybe in the 11 o'clock hour, I'll run the data real quick and we'll see who the prize possessions were this week.
I think this guy is going to be picked up in a lot of leagues. I know when I was submitting my KFFSC waivers tonight, I tried to put in some healthy / keep them honest bids on Deion Jackson, who I think is owned in roughly 2/3 of FFPC main event football guys league, which I get that data from fantasymojo.com. And if this Taylor thing, if this ankle doesn't improve, I would imagine since Hines is now in Buffalo and Phillip Lindsay is just a guy and Jordan Wilkins just got signed off the practice squad, given what we saw from Deion Jackson earlier, I think he's kind of a Sharky pickup this week. And I don't know if I bid enough on him to get him, but this is a guy that if Taylor is out and inactive this Sunday, Jackson to me is a top 20 guy for running backs for sure.
Yeah, it's a real gray situation here. I think the bids are going to be all over some leagues he won't get picked up, and then other leagues I think the bids are going to be really high because we don't have a good read on. Taylor didn't practice today, but is he going to practice later in the week? And then they might just decide to sit him anyway. And then I heard other things to say it's a minor high ankle sprain. What's a minor high ankle sprain? Yeah. So the range of outcomes is very ambiguous at this point on Taylor.
Yeah, it's like a minor concussion or minor surgery, or a minor car accident. Still pretty serious.
Right.
So yeah, I'm with you too. I mean, high ankle sprains, we've seen guys miss, months, sometimes 2 months with that. So, but we've also seen guys not miss a whole lot of time. So we'll see what happens on that Taylor thing. and you can keep it tuned right here on the Better Sports Network app, and all the great shows that we have here will be covering that for you going forward. Just talked about Nyheim Hines here, moving from Indianapolis. He goes to Buffalo. I think back to the offseason when the Bills tried to sign J.D. McKissick. He has a change of heart. He goes back to the nation's capital to play with the Commanders. But the Bills finally get their pass-catching running back. I think they thought they might have gotten one in James Cook in the draft, and he still might be one, but clearly they do not believe that he is a player to be trusted to be a pass-catching running back throughout the remainder of his rookie season. Cue Nyheim Hines here. Darren, in your opinion, for the people that had Devin Singletary and the people that had Nyheim Hines, how does this change what they were going to do with them before in regards to start sits to now Hines and Singletary being on the same team?
I think it's a lateral move for Hines. I guess the intent is to use him, like they wanted to use McKissick, but when they didn't have McKissick, they didn't seem to really carve out that role for anybody. And everybody was expecting Cook to have this big opening week, and it didn't happen. So I guess the question is, now that they have that player that they want, are they going to utilize him as such?
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to have to wait and see. So I think it's a lateral move. First weeks when somebody moves to a new team like this, you don't really know what to expect because they got to integrate into the offense as well. They can't just throw them out there. And, just like CMC, he went to the 49ers and there was really limited usage that first week. So, which kind of sucks this week because you probably need him, but he's not going to probably be utilized. Even if he does like really take on that role, I don't know that this is the week that he's going to serve you in that best capacity. So we'll have to see. He could hurt some of the other pieces on Buffalo though, like Isaiah McKenzie. He's probably going to siphon production from other places. So while it might be a lateral move for Hines, it might hurt some of the the lesser guys on Buffalo.
And I think the thing to understand about that is, what Zach Moss is, by the way, no longer on the Bills either. But what were you doing with James Cook before? Probably not starting him, right? So that shouldn't change anything right now.
Right.
Singletary is a guy that I had drafted late as a third, sometimes fourth running back in my leagues, and because of the 6 teams on bye this week, I'm forced to play him in some leagues. So I'm hoping that because this is the first week of Hines, maybe that Singletary is still out there on a significant amount of third downs, whereas he probably would not be going forward once Hines gets acclimated to that offense. We saw reports, Darren, on Tuesday morning I should say Tuesday afternoon, that starting on Tuesday morning, it seemed like the Green Bay Packers were the leaders in the clubhouse to get Chase Claypool. And then it sounds like the Bears upped their offer. The Packers weren't willing to top it. Lo and behold, Chase Claypool moves west. He goes from Pittsburgh to Chicago. Have the Bears found their number one receiver? That's the question that we're going to try to figure out here for people going forward, because I think a lot of fantasy owners were excited about Darnell Mooney this year, one of the few Chicago Bears to get excited about. And they had drafted him as their number 3, number 4, sometimes number 5 wide receiver. And you could just plug him in as a flex or maybe as a starting receiver on certain weeks. Then the Bears just decided not to throw it whatsoever. And Mooney was completely irrelevant. So was Cole Kmet in that passing offense. But now Justin Fields has been opening up a little bit. And whether that's a Luke Getsy, Matt Eberflus thing, or if that's a Justin Fields thing, doesn't really matter because they're passing the ball a little bit more. Mooney's been a little bit more relevant. How relevant does Chase Claypool become when he goes from the number 3 receiver in Pittsburgh behind Pickens and Deontay Johnson to Chicago, where he could be the 1A or just even the de facto 1 for the Bears offense now?
Yeah, but like you said, they're not really a passing offense. So he could be the one, in an offense where if you wanted to make some good money this year on player props, taking the under on Justin Fields' pass attempts per game has been, I think it's hit every week except one. So there's only so many targets to go around there. So while Claypool might be profiled a little bit more than he was in Pittsburgh, does that translate to, really significant production? He probably just, it probably hurts both of those guys. Mooney was actually breaking out a little bit. I mean, he was coming around after killing people. The past few weeks he did okay, but it's tough to. I think he's just like a like you said, a wide receiver 3, maybe best case. He's not going to have like a huge ceiling week to week. I don't really get excited about the move. It's nice, like it keeps him. Like you didn't have to worry about George Pickens taking more and more away from him every week, but it's not an environment where he's going to flourish to a great deal. But he makes a solid wide receiver 3 or 4 each week. Again, like probably not this week, but moving forward, it's going to help him. And Fields coming around from a fantasy points perspective, it's because they kind of figured out like get him to rush the ball more, right? And his points have been coming from rushing. It hasn't been throwing the ball really. They're still running the hell out of the ball. So, but it's still, it's okay for Claypool, but it didn't like really, drive me wild to see like, wow, this is such a great landing spot for him.
I almost, Justin Fields not the most accurate quarterback in the world. I almost wonder if they're, the Bears line of thinking is we have all this extra cap space now. We have all these draft picks. Why not go out and get a guy who's 6'4", big target radius, doesn't run the greatest of routes, obviously. So I think there's something to be said for that, but you don't have to run the greatest of routes. You don't have to be the most accurate quarterback in the world when Chase Claypool, has the wingspan of a spider too. So I think that could work in their favor. That might be a little bit negligible, but I just look at it on the surface of, Darnell Mooney couldn't do that. Even Cole Kmet couldn't do that to a certain extent. Now the Bears do have a player that can do that. Speaking of the NFC North, we saw an NFC North trade between 2 teams in the division. The Detroit Lions sending their tight end TJ Hawkinson to the Minnesota Vikings to take the place of Irv Smith, who's expected to miss, I think, about 2.5 months with his ankle right now. So Hawkinson, obviously the guy there in Minnesota. 2 things here, Darren. Number one, is this another lateral move here for Hawkinson to go from Detroit to Minnesota, a more prolific passing offense? But he's probably going to be behind he's for sure going to be behind Justin Jefferson. You could make the case he's going to be behind Adam Thielen. I don't necessarily see it that way. We'll get your thoughts. And then what does Detroit do, at tight end? We talk about, this is the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, tight end premium scoring in the FFPC. James Mitchell is obviously a player that we're going to be looking at in Detroit. I know there's another guy there too, and I should
Brock
have
Wright is the guy.
I knew it was Brock something. Brock Wright. Thank you. So Brock Wright, James Mitchell. We'll talk about those 2 guys, but then Hawkinson first. Your thoughts on him now that he's going to be wearing a purple jersey in Minnesota?
I think it is a lateral move again. Now he's got. Well, I guess in Detroit, you really only had to worry about St. Brown, right?
Right.
And then in Minnesota, it's been a target funnel for the most part for Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So I think he's going to do – it might be a little bit of a downgrade even in Minnesota, I would say. And again, this week, you're probably going to take a hit if you have – I know I have him on one team where I'm going to expect, reduced production from him just as he assimilates into the offense. But he could have bigger spike weeks than he did in Detroit, I think. So it's probably going to be less consistency, but it's not. It's probably a little bit of a downgrade for me, I would think, for him going to Minnesota.
Brock Wright's your guy in Detroit now that you would recommend FFPC players pick up.
I wouldn't recommend either. I mean, neither of those guys is the talent that Hawkinson is, right? So I mean, if you're going to start either of those guys, you got a ceiling of like 5 points. Like I wouldn't recommend either of those guys in Detroit.
And I'll just preface this by saying, well, we already know FFPC tight end premium scoring. Are either one of those guys rosterable in your opinion in a 12-team, 20-man roster FFPC league?
I mean, as a bye week fill-in, maybe Brock
at the most.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
but it is.
You might pick him up and get 0 or 2 points. So don't go blowing fat. And we might see tonight. There's for sure going to be some Brock Wright bids
Yep.
because he couldn't have been owned very much anywhere. Let me see. I have that up. I bet you he's like less than 5% owned.
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now.
He's
as well.
only owned in 5 of the football guy league, which is 0.4%. So we'll see what the enthusiasm is to pick up Brock Wright. It's probably not going to be a lot.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
It's crazy. Like almost 15,000 teams in the Football Guys Players Championship, and somehow 5 teams out of those 15,000 already own Brock Wright. Are they Lions fans? I don't know. So the other thing I'll bring up here, Darren, is the one trade that did not happen on the deadline, but it happened the next day after last week's guest co-host Adam Krautwurst and I got off the air. The Chiefs and Giants hooked up on a deal. The Giants sending their first-round pick last year, Kadarius Toney, to Kansas City. The Giants get a conditional 2023 third-round pick and a 2023 sixth-round pick for Toney. I had made the contention that, Toney had this hamstring issue or whatever, and I was wondering, is it a hamstring issue or is it just, the Giants don't really want to play him, and maybe Toney doesn't want to be there. They found a new home for him. All of a sudden, Andy Reid saying, yeah, his hamstring's good. He's going to be playing this week. The Chiefs still have, not still, they're still fresh off losing Tyreek Hill. They've had a cavalcade of people come in. They signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling to this big deal. They got Juju Smith-Schuster on the cheap. They drafted Sky Moore. None of those guys has really lit the world on fire, although Smith-Schuster has been coming on lately. Now you throw Kadarius Toney in the mix here. What do you do if you have any one of these Chiefs receivers? I think all 4 of them are rosterable. The question is, how do you know when to start which one?
Well, I think Andy Reid said they're going to use him this week.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know. And Toney's an alpha. But the problem is, like you said, he hasn't really played. In fact, the end of last year as well. Like he had that breakout game, and then we were just waiting to see it happen again, and it never did. And then this year, people were drafting him with high hopes, and it's just been a very strange situation. But he's the type of guy that really could take off in Kansas City. Kind of like how people thought, like when they signed Josh Gordon's, like, oh my God, this is the talent that they need, and it never happened. But if Toney really was sort of, playing possum and not being, not as hurt as he let on, this would be a great situation because they don't have nobody in Kansas City has really, other than Travis Kelce, commanded, the targets. They've all it's been a timeshare for the most part. So he could technically be a league winner. People were dropping a lot of money on him last week where he was available. So this is, the talent says this could be a significant situation for him. So I was happy, if you were already rostering him, you're happy you had him.
Right.
It's going to be fun to watch and see what happens with him. So maybe this week he actually does something. We'll find out.
And I think from a dynasty perspective too, like Toney, the fact that the Chiefs made this deal to get him on their roster, they don't have. I think Smith-Schuster's only signed for a year. Valdes-Scantling is so hit or miss. This could be a big thing here. And Sky Moore has taken his lumps. Toney, we already saw it last year with New York. He can play at this level. So it's going to be very exciting to see Patrick Mahomes throwing to Kadarius Toney, not only in 2022, but in 2023 and beyond. We have so much more beyond on this show. We're just getting started here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm with Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com. As our producer, Tyler Soto, points out, they have moved to the top of the 7th in Philadelphia. The Astros are up 5-0. I'm not going to be the guy that jinxes it, but Christian Javier is doing something special. I'm not going to say it out loud because I don't want to ruin history here. No offense to the resident Phillies fan, Darren Armani, but it could happen tonight in Game 4 of the World Series. What will happen on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show going forward is our Thursday night preview. That's coming up. We'll talk Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown. Yeah, they're awesome. But are they going to have an abbreviated night tomorrow? It's entirely possible with the Houston Texans. Talk about the Brandon Cook stuff that's going on there, as well as Dameon Pierce and your starts and sits. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Bettor Sports Network. He's Darren Armani. I'm Eric Balkman. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Better Sports Live with Rick Kamla. That's 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on Better Sports Network.
Andy Reid is the best current coach in the NFL. He's better than Belichick. Belichick has lost his way. He's better than Tomlin. He's better than Harbaugh. He's better than Shanahan. He's better than McCarthy down in Dallas. He's better than all of the gangster NFL coaches right now. Sean McDermott up in Buffalo, he's better than all these guys. Andy Reid is the greatest gangster that we have at head coach in the NFL right now. And I understand that you're saying, well, Belichick is the GOAT, Cam. How can that be true? Now you're bringing up old stuff. Bill Belichick can't draft anymore, okay? Sony Michel, talk to me. DK Metcalf, Debo Samuel versus N'Keal Harry. Okay, talk to me. This dude has lost his way. Remember the year when he should have bottomed out and just tanked, but he couldn't, and he went and got Cam Newton, and they were a mediocre team, right? He's lost his way, and not that he can't coach up a good defense and that kind of thing, but overall he's lost his way. Andy Reid's an absolute badass. They draft great. He's a great coach. Makes the right decisions when to go for it, when to kick, when to punt. The guy's the man.
The Playbook with Fensty and Ronis. Presented by FantasyAlarm.com.
I hate the stupid unsportsmanlike conduct. As long as you're not disrespectful to the opponent, you should be allowed to celebrate.
How I used to say it, and to bring up, because now basketball starting to bring up.
Oh, dude, it's even worse than basketball, isn't it?
So Dikembe Mutombo, who used to get teed up in the 2000s, in the 90s, they didn't give a crap. 2000s, though, when they tightened up the rules, they used to tee him up more when he did the Dikembe finger wag. But they wouldn't tee him up if he did it to the crowd, instead of looking at like Eton Thomas, like one time I remember, and doing it right to him, or when his back was turned, doing it right to him. If he did it to the crowd, they would never call it. And so that makes me wonder if these players, while, yeah, they want to talk a little smack, maybe they should flex towards the crowd than at the player who they're standing over.
I guess.
I know it's soft, man.
It is soft.
Because you know what?
Like we're gonna give 15 yards for that?
Bro, they think that, you want to know why? They're paranoid. They think that's going to turn into a fight.
See, I disagree with that. That's not going to start a fight.
I agree with you. They don't agree with
us.
It's
one thing, okay, if you spit in someone's face or say something derogatory, like about their family or something,
right.
Yeah, that can incite it. But if you're just like, yeah, I made that play, what? You know what I mean? Like, again, they know the rules. You got to know you're going to get flagged. You have to have discipline. But, like, I don't know. I have no problem with celebration as long as it's not disrespectful.
What's disrespectful?
It's interpretation, and that's my problem. Watch, it's going to cost someone in a big playoff game, and that's when people are going to go crazy. There'll be a third down play. Someone makes a pass breakup, and they're in someone's face. They're going to throw a flag. It'll extend the drive. That team scores, wins the playoff game because of it. You need something drastic for it to really leave an imprint, and I hope that doesn't happen to mine.
Better Sports Network is betting, fantasy, collectibles. It's sports talk done better.
We are doing it better right here on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Falkman. He is Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com. Hey, give him a follow at Fantasy Mojo on Twitter. It is the best high-stakes fantasy football content you can get anywhere, and I think that's almost inarguable at this point for sure. I do want to remind everybody, as you're watching the high-stakes fantasy football show here on BSN, don't forget that we got a pretty good community going on here right now. If you want to interact, the best way to do it is to download the free Better Sports Network app. Register for free. Click join the show. You can call in, you can chat, you can enter contests, and it's just one push of a button, which is awesome. You look at all the memorabilia we've been giving away. We just gave away a Shaquille O'Neal signed basketball earlier today on Rick Hamlin's show, which you watched right before this. So very exciting stuff. We take care of our viewers here at BSN, and we're going to take care of everybody right now as we get into the Thursday night football game. Darren Armani, a noted Philadelphia Eagles fan, your Eagles, undefeated Eagles, Houston tomorrow to take on the Houston Texans. We look at this game. Number one, I'll ask you this. This is the question I always ask everyone. Is this going to be a good game tomorrow, or is it going to be a bloodbath? Is this the Eagles getting off to a fast start and Houston never catching up? Are all the fireworks going to be in the first quarter, maybe the first part of the second quarter, and then it's a slog from then on out, and we're just, waiting to see what Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, or not Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, Kirk Herbstreit and Al Michaels. Gotta get them mixed up. Kirk Herbstreit and Al Michaels.
Amazon crew.
Right, the Amazon crew. We'll just see what Al Michaels making thinly veiled, or maybe not even thinly veiled, references to the over-under and the spread on that game, which is always the most exciting part for me in these Thursday night games when they get away. How is this game playing out tomorrow? Eagles blowout?
Well, ever since they've started these Thursday night games, I mean, they've been bad. Regardless of the teams playing, they've been bad more times than not.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's just they're two teams coming off a short week, and I don't know what it is. They're not prepared. They're tired. But I know that the Eagles did. I mean, their starters got yanked, I think midway through the fourth quarter last week. So
right,
they probably have less, miles on them than they might usually have. But I mean, it's a 14.5-point spread.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect them. And Houston's wide receiver core is beat up. Nico Collins is out. Brandon Cooks. He was going to be rumored to be traded, and then he was out today from practice for personal reasons. So, and he's got to play tomorrow night. So I think it's going to be. I think the Eagles are going to have their way with them. I mean, obviously they're undefeated. It's on paper. It should be a bloodbath. It might be an ugly game though. So if you're expecting huge point totals, I don't think that it's really going to be. I think Hurts is going to put up a nice stat line. Because he doesn't need much. He'll just, he can do it rushing. He might have a couple TDs. He's not going to have a monster game. I don't think anybody's going to have a monster game. But if you've got anybody on Houston other than Dameon Pierce, who might do like a Najee Harris type of, he caught a lot of balls playing catch up and, got some yards rushing, but I don't think you expect much out of the Houston side.
You think Cooks plays in this game?
It's tough to say. I mean, he wasn't out because they said something about a wrist, but that didn't seem serious.
Yeah, to me, it was all just personal stuff, and he was hoping to get dealt. He didn't get dealt, and then obviously, you already referenced that he was sulking on social media. I guess here's the thing: when you submitted your waivers in your leagues tonight, I don't know what you have for Cooks shares at all, but did you make any for the teams that you were expecting to start Cooks? Did you plan as if he was going to miss tomorrow night's game when you're placing waivers? And you have to set your lineup for tomorrow in regards to Cooks.
Well, I didn't. I do have Cooks on a couple teams. I already have decent backups, but I can tell you in the Kings Classic leagues that I participate in, those are 14 teamers. I picked up Philip Dorsett last night in both leagues just in case, because you're really straight. If you think FFPC waivers are bad, these leagues, it's even worse. Like there's nothing available. So I picked him up and maybe he gets a start. But I mean, if Cooks is a professional, the guy's going to play. He's not going to leave the team. So it's, I think he'll play if he's healthy.
Okay. So I don't want to caution anybody. Hey, you may not want to start Jalen Hurts. You may want to not start, AJ Brown tomorrow because they might get pulled early. I don't think you can do that be irresponsible to do that from a season-long perspective. But if you're playing DFS, if you're playing, like the FFPC Weekly Challenge, right, which we'll get into in a little bit in the second hour, maybe those are guys to avoid, Darren, because if the Eagles are up 24-3 at halftime, I can't imagine those guys getting a ton of run later on.
I don't think they're going to blow them out. I think it's going to be like we're saying, Thursday night games are bad. You got to manage your expectations. Those guys are going to play, but they're not going to be called on to have, it's not going to be a game situation where we're going to blow them out. So I would still start AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. It's just, it might not be. Don't expect last week. Don't have the recency bias. Like, oh my God. And then even before last week, AJ Brown wasn't really featured as much as Devonta Smith was. So. And there's 6 teams on bye. You're going to have to play them. If you have the luxury of sitting one of those guys, then I don't know what your team looks like. It must be something phenomenal.
Yeah, might be ready to win $1 million in the FFPC.
Yeah,
it might be.
It'll be a little ugly.
Yes, and let's go to the better boss here right now, chiming in the chat. He just made a trade. I'm assuming this is redraft, although I know he plays Dynasty as well. He gets Devontae Smith, right? He gets Devontae Smith from the Eagles. He gives up Michael Carter and DK Metcalf. for him, and he's obviously excited to play him tomorrow night. How do you assess that deal? How do you break that deal down, Darren? Would you give up DK Metcalf and Michael Carter from a season-long redraft perspective to get Devontae Smith?
No, I don't think so. If I'm taking just straight up DK Metcalf for Devontae Smith, I'm probably taking Metcalf. I might not have done that deal.
And I guess it all depends. Like, I think that the thing, and I don't know how big the league is. Obviously, it's not dynasty; it is redraft.
And you don't know what the guy had on his roster to begin with. If he had some
Right.
embarrassment of riches as well. I don't know.
And I think there is something to be said for the sample size that we have now. We're in November, and we're looking at 2 full months here of what these teams are going to be. Now, the Seattle Seahawks offense has been a surprise, but the Eagles have been a juggernaut. And to get a piece of that, especially with Tyler Lockett picking things up this season too, I think that Metcalf is maybe less of the alpha than he has been. Now, Devontae Smith is still the number 2, clearly, to AJ Brown, but it's sort of in the eye of the beholder. I know you don't like it. I think I probably would have rather had Metcalf and Carter, but I can totally see the reasoning behind why you would want Smith on this team as opposed to Metcalf and Carter, especially if you got a bunch of running backs. He's talking about Smith has already had his bye, whereas Metcalf has not had his bye. He says Smith, better offense and quarterback. No argument from me there. I think that's pretty clear,
Right.
for sure. But always good to break down these trades. Darren, do you participate in any leagues? I do not, to my knowledge. No, I don't participate in any leagues that are non-dynasty that have trading. And it's probably not good for me being a fantasy analyst because I don't normally think about these things from a week-to-week basis because it's never anything I entertain.
Yeah, I mean the Kings Classic leagues have trades, although it's rare. And my home league has trades, although people are afraid to trade because they never trade with me for sure.
Well, and the other thing to keep as the better boss is pointing out here too, like you got to think about bye weeks. Have they already had? Because like that is a huge thing when you consider like, okay, this is one extra week of play that I get from this guy that I won't have from this player right here. And I don't even think about things like that. It's important to keep it in mind.
So I can see that. It depends. Like the thing with Devonta Smith is he's going to be inconsistent week to week. But if you are thinking about a buy, I mean, that certainly plays into it. So yeah, we don't know what his receiver core looks like outside of Metcalf.
This is non-PPR too. He said Smith has outscored Metcalf per game so far this season. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right. We talked about Brandon Cooks a little bit, just real quick. If he's active, you're playing him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Damian Pierce. I don't have an embarrassment of riches for running back. The leagues I have him, I'm playing him. Even if this is a massive negative game script for him, I got to trot him out there.
Yeah, he's still going to catch a bunch of balls. Like if assuming they're in catch-up mode, and if those receivers are decimated, then he's gonna, like I said, he's gonna play probably like Najee Harris did last week, and the ball's going to go his way because they don't have any other options.
It's going to be a fun game tomorrow. For Eagles fans, if you're a Texans fan, I don't know if it's going to be so much fun. We just hope for fantasy that our studs are coming through. Tyler Soto, our wonderful producer, Astros went to the bullpen. Christian Javier is out of the game despite not giving up something, and it is still going as we head to the 8th inning in Philadelphia, 5-0. Astros will give you updates on that.
Wow.
As we
Phillies decided to just take the night off, I guess.
Well, they got all those home runs last night.
Feast of famine.
Yeah, totally. Do you? By the way, just real quick, I know this is a football show, so my Milwaukee Brewers were in a chase to get to the postseason with the San Diego Padres and your Philadelphia Phillies. Now, do you know who Matt Gelb is, Darren?
No.
I believe Matt Gelb covers the Philadelphia Phillies for The Athletic. I think that's what he is. And I remember this stuck in my mind, a tweet that came out towards the end of the season. Brandon Marsh, the center fielder for the Phillies, he tweeted out, Brandon Marsh just lost a fly ball in the sun, 2 runs scored. It's all falling apart. And I looked at the replies to this tweet. This is F this team, the season's over, Philly suck, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, God, what are those people thinking now? Fast forward 3 weeks later, and all of a sudden the Phillies are, 2 games away from being World Series champs. It just blows my mind how fast things change, not only in professional sports and Major League Baseball, but in fantasy football. And when you look at what the decisions we have to make in week 9 with the bye-apocalypse upon us, 6 teams on bye this week, it's insane. So when we do these start sits, which we're going to do right now, they're going to be a little bit weird because desperate times call for desperate measures. So let's kick it off here. Kenyon Drake or Antonio Gibson. Now, things to consider. We don't know the health. I tried to research this before the show. I couldn't find any news on Gus Edwards. I don't know how healthy he is. I know he got pulled with a hamstring injury in the game last week. I don't know if he's going to be able to go this week. And if he does miss, I'm assuming it's going to be Kenyon Drake as the lead guy. Then you have Antonio Gibson, who has been coming on lately. And looked pretty good, especially against the Green Bay Packers. He caught a touchdown in that game. I think his average yards per carry were significantly better than Brian Robinson. Now, the Antonio Gibson and the Commanders get the Minnesota Vikings at home this week. That's a total of 43.5. The Commanders are 3.5-point dogs in that game. Kenyon Drake, on the other hand, the Baltimore Ravens this week, week 9, are going to be taking on the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football in the Big Easy. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites, a total of 48.5. Tricky thing is here, all the games will have been taken place prior to this game, so we won't really know what's going on with Gus Edwards prior to this. You're going to have to make a decision. Is it going to be Kenyon Drake or is it going to be Antonio Gibson for you?
I would go Gibson. Personally, I can't trust Kenyon Drake anytime. The way Kenyon Drake rolls is you start him, he doesn't do anything. And then when he's on your bench, he produces a nice game. And then you start him and he goes back to, crawls under his rock again. So
Okay.
I think Gus Edwards, they said that the hamstring is an issue. It's probably going to be Drake and Justice Hill. But that doesn't mean there's going to be a lot of production. Gibson is coming off a nice game. Brian Robinson's not really lighting the world on fire as much of a great story as that is. I mean, I would, to me, this one's pretty easy. I would go Antonio Gibson, especially against the Vikings where they should be playing from behind.
Yeah, and which obviously is advantageous for Gibson and not so much advantageous for Brian Robinson. The Dizzle, our mutual friend Dave Gerzak, actually said this to me. Actually posted in one of the group chats I was a part of a couple of weeks ago. He said, thrilled that Brian Robinson is back from this gunshot wound. That's awesome. The problem is he's still not that great for fantasy. And right. I think he was a little bit more colorful than that. I won't say it on the air. But yeah, that's the issue. We get excited about Brian Robinson, but Antonio Gibson's still a thing, and he might be a bigger thing than we thought earlier. All right, how about this? Allen Robinson or Robert Woods. Robinson, the guy who was signed to essentially take the place of Robert Woods, who got shipped off to the Tennessee Titans. You have a choice between those guys this week. The Titans visit Kansas City, where they are 12.5-point underdogs. That is the Sunday night game this week. The Rams have the 4:25 slot against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are 3-point dogs, a total of just 42.5. I guess I don't think it's that unpopular anymore to bench Allen Robinson. I'm going to roll with the team that has the positive game script here for Robert Woods, and I'm going to play him over Robinson. And I'm not really going to think too hard about it. They should be throwing, whether it's Tannehill, whether it's Malik Willis, we'll find out. But I think Woods is the play here.
So the Titans, the implied point total for the Titans is 17.5. And for the Rams, we have
probably about the same, 18 or 19, maybe
20.
Okay.
The thing, Robinson's been coming on a little bit. He got off to a dreadful start. I think he's been getting between 5 and 7 targets. Cooper Kupp's ankle's not 100%. So maybe that leads a little bit more towards Allen Robinson doing a little bit more than he usually does. And you figure the Titans are probably going to want to try and control the game with Derrick. They won't be able to, but they're certainly going to prefer to run the ball with Derrick Henry. So it's not as much of a slam dunk for me to go with Robert Woods, who hasn't really put up a lot of points. I think he had a nice game, maybe week 5 or week 6. I'm thinking go Robinson here personally. For me, it's close, but I think I might. It's hard to say I trust Allen Robinson more, because why would you trust him? But I just have this feeling he might have a little bit of a better game. I think he has a higher floor than Robert Woods would have.
Totally agree. And especially if Malik Willis goes, I mean, God only knows what he's capable of at quarterback. And I feel like since Derrick Henry ran roughshod last week, we didn't really get an accurate representation of what we can expect from Robert Woods going forward. Now, to your point with Allen Robinson, this dude had no more than 4 catches. He had 4 catches once in the first 5 weeks of the season. Otherwise, he was always less than 4. His last 2 games, 5 for 63 and a touchdown against the Carolina Panthers, 5 for 54 against the 49ers. He has seen 13 targets his last 2 weeks. He's caught 10 of them. I think, looking at this a little bit deeper, I think I might be, leaning towards your side a little bit, especially as you point out, and we're not really talking about it a whole lot. Cooper Kupp is probably not going to be playing this game at 100%, which would make Allen Robinson a little bit more desirable. So maybe he is the play here. I think I'm changing my mind a little bit, or a lot bit, and saying Robinson over Woods here. Tight ends, Evan Engram, who has been garnering, he got off to a fast start, I feel like, this year. Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com. I feel like he got off to a fast start, and he's been okay. I mean, tight end is such a dumpster fire each and every week, so it's tough to really say that Evan Engram is ever a strong start. But he gets the Raiders, who are, boy, I don't know what to say about them right now. They're 2-5, and they don't look great. I mean, they don't look as good as a 2-5 team. That's right. Devontae Adams can't catch any passes. They can't get Hunter Renfrow going in that offense. It's been bad. So now they visit Jacksonville this week. Jacksonville is a 1.5-point dog, 47.5. That's what Evan Engram is looking at, and in the 1 o'clock slot. And then Mike Gesicki is the other guy that we'll talk about here, where you have to choose between one of those 2 guys. Mike Gesicki visiting Chicago, again, a 1 o'clock game. They are 5-point favorites in a total of 45.5 in that game. If you can only play one, I think in the FFPC, you can make a case, hey, I should start both these guys. But in a standard 1-point full PPR league for tight ends, are you rolling with Evan Engram or Mike Gesicki?
I'm going Engram. I don't think the Dolphins are going to need Gesicki. I mean, they're playing Chicago. I mean, so he was in a real slump starting out the year. He came on a little bit the past couple of weeks, but Ingram's been outstanding the past 4 weeks. He's 15. I'm looking at FFPC scoring, but he's been double digits the past 4 weeks. And like I said, he's leading that team in targets over the past 4 weeks as well, over Christian Kirk. So he's been hot. And I would definitely stick with an Evan Engram here, especially against Las Vegas. They should. Well, Las Vegas is not. They had their problems last week, but I think the game script for Evan Engram is going to be a little bit better than Gesicki, where the Dolphins should really kind of take care of the Bears.
Darren, a little Evan Engram trivia here. In the last 4 weeks, ballpark this for me. Guess how many targets he's seen combined in the last 4 weeks? This is Houston, Indianapolis, the Giants, and Denver. Those 4 games. Give me his total targets in those 4 games.
I'll go 16.
29.
29
targets. And now he's only turned that into 19 catches, but 29 targets. He's caught 19 of them.
Yeah.
Last 4 games. I'll go for most recent backwards. 4 for 55 and a touchdown against the Broncos in London. 4 for 67 against the Giants, 5 for 40 against Indy, and 6 for 69 against the Texans. He only had one game with more than 6 catches before that, and that was week 2 against Indianapolis, where he had 7. So you're right. and we talked about Christian Kirk at the top of the show too. Christian Kirk is a guy that has been slowing down, as you pointed out, where Evan Engram's really getting amped up here. Tight end premium scoring in the FFPC, you love to see stat lines like this. So Evan Engram's start. Gesicki, the other thing too is, and I'm reminded, I can't remember which analyst said this before the start of the year, but Mike McDaniel wants his tight ends to block. What is Mike Gesicki's biggest weakness in his game? Probably blocking.
Yeah.
He's super athletic. He gets down the seam. He can make the athletic catch. But if you can't block out there, you're probably going to get penalized a little bit by not being on the field as much as a lot of tight ends would be. He's made some plays. He's had some pretty good touchdowns. His gritty has gotten better over the last couple of months. I guess that part's debatable a little bit, but he's been getting in the end zone. But I think, touchdowns are fluky. You got to go with Evan Engram here. I am with you 100% here, and I will be with you 100% for the next 60 minutes as well. It is Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com as the co-host for the FFPC's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show this week. We'll get into a few more start sits. I want to touch on a couple of start sits from that game tomorrow night between the Eagles and Texans. We'll get into that. I also want to break down the injuries that are really affecting the receivers for not only the Chargers, but the Packers as well. And we will formulate a lineup for you in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. That's coming up at the bottom of hour number 2. We are rolling on here all the way up to the midnight hour. And we'll get into some FFPC waivers coming up in just a little bit. He is Darren Armani from Fantasy Mojo. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Bettor Sports Network. We'll be back in just a little bit.
Corey, Nando, and Friends, presented by Mayo Media on Bettor Sports Network.
I'm convinced that Babe Ruth is a fictional character. Babe Ruth is not real. No, it's not. Babe Ruth is not real. We've been hoodwinked. We've been bamboozled. We've been led astray. We've been run amok.
Keep going.
Babe Ruth. I don't know the rest. Babe Ruth is a fictional character. I'm dead serious. Babe Ruth is a fictional character. Y'all are never going to get me to believe Babe Ruth is real. Babe Ruth is like a baseball Santa Claus. I'm not buying it. After I saw those highlights last night of Babe Ruth, I'm like, there's no way you can tell me that Babe Ruth is a real person. Who do you know? There is nobody under the sound of my voice that has ever seen Babe Ruth play. I asked my pop, you ever seen Babe Ruth play? He's like, no. Nobody's ever seen Babe Ruth play.
I mean, come on.
I'm telling you, Babe Ruth is a fictional character. Even Babe Ruth baseball cards, it looked like it's drawn. Like, Babe Ruth is not real. Y'all trying to pull a fast one. Listen, I don't know who made this up. Maybe it was Phil Rizzuto. Maybe it's the Lenny Melnick. But Babe Ruth is not a real person. There's no way. Everything about Babe Ruth is sketchy. If you didn't go to the games, how do you know that it really happened? Or I listened on the radio. You listen to Ovaltine on the radio. That old school radio was all fiction. Everything on old school radio was fake. But you think Babe Ruth is real?
Look, he lived until 1948. So if you find someone who's like 85 years old, they might have remembered him when he was little, when they were a little teenager.
Babe Ruth was made up by baseball purists. I am certain.
You do that thing where you pause the Babe Ruth video and you zoom in and you zoom in and you zoom in. You see like some artist's autograph like right here.
Yeah, you like
some digital art right here. Yeah.
Somebody need to investigate this and see if Babe Ruth is a real person. I'm pretty sure Babe Ruth is a fictional character created to make people think that like there was this great jolly old baseball player that drank beers and ate hot dogs and hit 60 home runs. Like the home run record before Babe Ruth was like 14. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and
but
now
he figured it out. Like who figured out the dunk, right? Like he's just like,
that's like Dr. J or something, right? Then Dr. J, probably was before Dr. J, but Dr. J made the dunk famous. Babe Ruth made the home run famous, or maybe that was a way to get people to like, we're gonna make baseball America's pastime. But in order to do so, we need somebody who we can make the face of the sport. And they didn't have no face of the sport. So they're like, okay, let's make him a fictional guy that played for the Red Sox and was traded to the Yankees for like tickets to tickets to cats. You know what I'm saying? Like the Red Sox get a Yankees.
You tried to say
is there any footage of Babe Ruth in the Red Sox uniform? None. I'm telling you, Babe Ruth is a fictional character.
Four minutes after the 11 o'clock hour here as we roll on with hour number 2 of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship right here on the Bettor Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, as well as the Fantasy Football Players Championship. My co-host tonight is the godfather of not only the Pros versus Joes, but the godfather of all things FFPC and Football Guys Players Championship data. You follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Mojo. You subscribe to his website at fantasymojo.com. Darren Armani, welcome in. I feel like I give you this big build up and you're feeling good about yourself, and then Tyler Soto posts here going into the 9th inning. There are still no you-know-whats for the Phillies tonight. 5-0. The Astros lead Game 4 of the World Series. But,
I feel bad for the fans who went tonight versus last night because they had a lottery for tickets. And, if you got tonight's game, it's great to be there. But, man, that's going to be a different vibe coming out of the stadium.
Yeah, Mattress Mac is swearing for a different reason tonight so far. It's funny, Darren. I don't know if I ever shared this story with you. Maybe I probably said it on air. You probably saw this, but my Milwaukee Bucks. I'm wearing my 2021 Milwaukee Bucks NBA champions hat tonight. But the Bucks had not won since the 69-70 year. I beg your pardon, the 70-71 year. It was Lou Alcindor's second year with the Milwaukee Bucks. It was him and Oscar Robertson. That was the last title that the Bucks had won in Milwaukee. And I was all amped up to go to be part of the Deer District and party. I live probably a good 2-hour drive north of Milwaukee here in Northeast Wisconsin. And I was all excited to go down there for Game 6. I made it to Game 4. So at least I can say I was there for one of the games. Game 6, the night the Bucks beat the Suns and won the first championship for Milwaukee in 50 years because of the pandemic the year before. The NBA season got pushed back. And where was I during Game 6 when the Bucks won? I was right where I was, right where I am right now, covering the FFPC Pros versus Joes. Could not get away for it. So I had one eye on the Bucks winning, while Farrell Elliott and I were bringing you. I think you might have been in that draft. I could be wrong on that. You might have been in that draft that night, bringing you the play-by-play coverage for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. So disappointing, but I was thrilled that they won. And it's one of those things, man. Like, you've at least got to see an Eagles championship, Eagles Super Bowl in your time.
Right.
You've seen a Phillies World Series in your time.
World Series for the Phillies.
No Sixers titles, though, right? No, you saw the Sixers in the finals.
Oh yeah, 83 we won.
Well, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Who was on? That was Dr. J. Was Billy Cunningham on that team? This is predating my knowledge on the Sixers.
I think he was the coach. It was Moses Malone.
Yeah.
Tony Cheeks.
Andrew Toney. Yep. Mo Cheeks.
Bobby Jones.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bobby Jones. Oh God. Yeah. Great perimeter.
On my age. I'm showing FFPC Boomer right in front of you. We're reliving the glory days of the early 86 championships.
I have a local sports radio show in Northeast Wisconsin, and my co-host is, I think, almost 2 decades my senior, and he will talk about stuff that was going on in the 60s and 70s, and I have no idea what he's talking about. It's just crazy. That's what we do here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. We bring stuff like this up. And by the way, I'll mention this too. The bettorsports.com website, if you haven't checked it out, make sure you're doing it. While you're listening on the app, you can see the hosts like myself and Darren. And the program schedule is on there, our sponsors, upcoming prizes for all the giveaways that we're doing, plus the Bettor Sports Network Marketplace. Also live, that's at bettorsports.com. There's shirts, there's tumblers, there's blankets, beanies, and much more. It's all available at bettorsports.com. So make sure you're checking that out. All right, let's move on here and talk a little bit about. So here's one thing I want to mention right away. Tomorrow on the Bettor Sports Network, Darren, this affects you. Jalen Hurts autographed helmet will be given away on the BSN sometime tomorrow. So make sure you're paying attention to all the shows. And by the way, everybody, I want to make it well known that I am, that this show is only one show on the Better Sports Network. We're only on once a week. The guys that are on every single week and women that are on every single week, think about Front Yard Fantasy Morning Show, which is going to be coming up at midnight when we're done here. Moose and Keith with Mark Malusis and Keith Irizarry. Lunch Money with Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers. Corey, Nando, and Friends, that's going to be going on every single day. The Playbook with Fensty and Ronis. Better Sports Live with Rick Hamla, which you watched right before we came on tonight. And, of course, Lisa Ann, Cody Decker, Dynasty Nerds, Campus to Canton, Dr. Roto, all that and more. College football Saturday mornings, NFL game day coverage on Sunday beginning at 9 a.m. Eastern and continuing throughout the day on Better Zone. That's all on the Better Sports Network. And be watching for that Jalen Hurts giveaway tomorrow. Nice. Okay. Chargers. They have a situation here. And I have not seen anything on Josh Palmer, but here's what I do know. Mike Williams is going to be out several weeks with a high ankle sprain. Keenan Allen, as I bring this up right now, this, is really baffling. I guess it's not. Nothing baffles me with Keenan Allen anymore. I've owned him in so many redraft and dynasty leagues over the years, Darren, that when he's hurt or not practicing, I guess it doesn't surprise me. He says that somehow during the Week 8 bye that the Chargers had, his hamstring injury actually got worse. He was downplaying it. He said it could have been scar tissue breaking up, but he said he is not going to take the field until he is 100%. He said he was on a snap count in the Week 7 game right before the Chargers bye, and it sounds like he might be missing Week 9 in a really good matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Okay. Knowing that, we're hoping Josh Palmer is out there. He could be a big-time start in Week 9 if he's healthy enough to go. But outside of that, what Chargers receiver here, Darren, are you looking at, knowing that Mike Williams will not be going and knowing that Keenan Allen very well might not be going either? Obviously, you like Palmer, you like Gerald Everett, you love Austin Eckler. But if there is another receiver for the Chargers in Week 9, is there a guy that you're looking to pick up and start?
Well, I guess DeAndre Carter is the next man up. So that doesn't really excite people. But somehow Herbert gets the job done. But I think Eckler is going to pick up a lot of the targets. And Carter, I did process the FFPC waivers, and Carter was the fourth most picked up player tonight. So a lot of people are getting ahead of this and preemptively picking up Carter because, again, it's a bye week. So somebody like him is going to get started. Mm-hmm. And that's the craziest thing, Keenan Allen. Like, it got worse over the bye. Isn't that Two Packers' favorite player, Keenan Allen? He's notorious for drafting Keenan Allen.
Well, the problem with Two Packers is he's a massive Chargers fan. And the problem with being a massive Chargers fan is 60% of your favorite players are hurt on any given week.
Right.
That's the way it is. He loves Keenan Allen. He loves his Chargers. But certainly, for whatever reason, he can't quit Keenan Allen.
Yeah, they were saying that the Chargers training staff should be investigated because of the constant injuries that happen upon them.
And not only that, Darren, think about like when you think it, because it was a running joke for years, right, of how badly injured the Chargers were every single year. And then the guy injects a needle into Tyrod Taylor's lung. I mean, just cementing, like, you almost can't make that up, right?
Malpractice.
It's totally malpractice, yeah. And then that inevitably launched the career of Justin Herbert, which we're thankful for. But man, that sucks for Tyrod Taylor. You can't make that stuff up. All right, so I am at fantasymojo.com right now. I'm looking at so are the waiver wire results?
I have to post it. So I've run it. I'm looking at the raw
data.
Yeah, I'll post them all tomorrow morning, but I'm looking at the waivers, and we were talking about there's some defenses. So I'll give you the top 5 position players picked up. Terrace Marshall was the most picked up, just in terms of ads. Then Isaiah Likely, then Deion Jackson, Actually, Carter was a 6. Then Conklin, then Carter. Now, Deion Jackson.
Conklin, I'm surprised was out there.
He was available. A lot of people dropped him. He had 2 bad games and they dumped him.
Yeah.
It's what have you done for me lately? And they got rid of him. But so Deion Jackson, we were talking about, there was $1,000 bid for Deion Jackson in the Football Guys Players Championship that somebody paid for him.
Whoa! Hold on. So a couple of things. So Football Guys Players Championship, you're ponying up $350 for a team in that. You're trying to win a $500,000 grand prize. Now, whoever this team was, who bid $1,000 on Deion Jackson, you only get $1,000 to spend for your whole budget all season, right? So this guy or woman, whoever it is, did not spend any money. There are no $0 bids in the FFPC or FPC. He or she has not spent any money all season and just transformed his or her team from a Football Guys Players Championship team to a 7-week best ball team now, because they have no more bidding dollars to spend the rest of the season. Can you look at that? Was that a Jonathan Taylor team that did that?
I don't know. I only see the bid. I mean, I'll dive into it tomorrow for sure, and I'll post it on Twitter. But who doesn't make any bids for 8 weeks and then suddenly just drops all 1,000? It looks like a spite bid is what something like this looks like to me.
Spite bid. And think about this too. We've been drilling this home all night. 6 teams are on bye this week. You're telling me that this person is supremely confident in being able to field a roster when 20% of the league's teams are on bye, that they can afford to go $1,000 on one backup running back? Maybe they have inside information that Jonathan Taylor is going to be IR'd and Deion Jackson's going to be the guy the rest of the way. Then I could see it. I remember back, and I always bring this up too, that you remember the year, I want to say it was Bernard Pollard. I could be wrong. Whoever the safety was for the Kansas City Chiefs, when they tackled Tom Brady at the knee, tore his ACL, he's out for the season. I did see $1,000 bid on Matt Castle that year.
Yeah.
And it turned their Football Guys team into a best ball team the rest of the way. And certainly makes it, David Hubbard, 2016 FFPC main event champ. He loves that kind of stuff, right? Because it's easy to manage multiple teams when you don't have any bidding dollars left. But man, that is aggressive. So just to reiterate, the number one player claimed was it Terrace Marshall?
Terrace Marshall was the most added player in terms of number of leagues.
Okay.
And that's based on availability.
Right, exactly. Tyler Conklin was up there. Where did you say DeAndre Carter was? Number 6?
He was 6th after Tyler Conklin. So Isaiah Likely was the second most added position player. A median bid on Deion Jackson was $180. So you had to I bid on him in a dynasty league and ended up getting him. I bid $270 because I needed him badly. I think he'll be startable because it's such a bad week.
Right.
I've got nothing there. But yeah, so likely also you would think they're going to sit Andrews, because how does a guy leave the game and then play the next week with a bye coming up next week? That just seems like they wouldn't risk it. If he was hurt enough to pull him out of the game and put him in street clothes, how would he be playing the next day? Granted, it's on Monday night, I think, which he has a little bit.
And the other thing to bring up, they played on Thursday night too.
Right. So he got a little extra time, but he's coming off a week where he didn't play, and then he gets hurt. Like it seems unlikely that they would put Andrews out there with the bye coming up.
It seems unlikely that they wouldn't be starting Isaiah Likely, right? Thank you so much. No, I think that you raise a good point there, and I think Mark Andrews, the people that do have Mark Andrews on their squads probably have to look elsewhere. And if you want the full scale, like, you'll get the highlights on Twitter for free, obviously, but if you want the full scale, the stuff that can really help you win your leagues, sign up fantasymojo.com. Get a subscription to make sure that you are getting on the cutting edge of what all the high stakes players are doing out there, so you can dominate your leagues as well and be ahead of the curve for sure. That's at fantasymojo.com. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the Chargers here. And I think the Packers wide receiver situation is also interesting. I was on board last week, Darren, with Romeo Dobbs. I was on board with Sammy Watkins because it was a revenge game. But I thought the Bills were going to get out to a significant lead, and the Packers would be forced to throw the football. The Bills did get out to a lead, and the Packers had so much success running the football, they almost did it to their own detriment in the second half. They used a lot of clock, and they rushed for over 200 yards against the league's top-ranked rush defense. So I was very bullish on Dobbs and Watkins because I thought that they'd be playing catch-up. That wasn't the case. Dobbs was okay. I mean, they obviously had that really sweet touchdown catch in the corner of the end zone, but Watkins was non-existent. They get the Lions this week. The Lions are an historically bad defense this year. I think, and I'm trying not to misquote it. One of my other shows, I had the Locked On Packers podcast host and the Leap co-founder, the Leap newsletter co-founder who covers the Packers for a living, Peter Bukowski. And he knows Packers inside and out. And he said the Lions defense this year is giving up, like it had something to do with the DVOA. But what they're giving up to quarterbacks this year, on average, is better than what Aaron Rodgers was doing during his last MVP campaign. In other words, they are making the opposing quarterbacks do better than a dude who won an MVP last year on a weekly basis on average. That's insane that they're doing that. So now I say, okay, well, this is the week, right? Fire up Dobbs. It sounds like Alan Lazard's going to be back. Fire up him. Christian Watson did not practice today. He's still in concussion protocol. I don't know if they can't really rush him out there. I mean, he's got a pass protocol. But how do you feel about Lazard, who's coming off the shoulder injury, who did practice today? How do you feel about Lazard and Dobbs this week in a matchup that, quite frankly, they should put a lot of points on the board against Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, it's Dobbs and Lazard should put up nice totals. So the Packers have the fourth highest implied points total for the week at 26.25. And I think it's going to be a huge Dobbs game, and then Jones could contribute as well in the passing game. So it's going to be those three. So
what about Tunyon for FFPC players?
Well, that's true. He's got the third over the. I dug this up. I think over the past 3 weeks. He's the number 3 tight end over the past 3 weeks. So tight end is so shallow. You definitely got to fire him up if you have him. So then you would add.
And I definitely will be. I have a lot of Tunyon, Dalton Schultz teams. Obviously, Dalton Schultz on bye this week, so I'll be firing up Tunyon. You know what's weird about Tunyon is, so this guy has had 2 games where he had more than 5 targets, and that was week 3 against Tampa when he went 6 for 37, and it was last week when he went 5 for 35 at Buffalo. So, yes, that's
he had 12 targets in week 6. It looks like.
Yes, and that was the outlier game. 12 targets in week 6. I beg your pardon. He had 12 targets in week 6. That was the 10 for 90 game against the Jets, where they just could not get anything going downfield. And Tunyon really saddled up and rode that week for fantasy owners. He was awesome. The thing is with Tunyon, and this is good for full PPR leagues and tight end premium leagues, because this is a player that does not threaten down the seam. And I don't know if coming off the ACL, if he just doesn't have that athleticism anymore. He's a couple of years removed from being a number 3 tight end in FFPC scoring. And now he just looks like sort of a guy that catches the ball, maybe gets a few yards, but he's not a playmaker, game breaker type guy anymore. Not that he ever was a massive one, but he was a significant one back in 2020. So Tunyon, I think, because of the volume, you have to get him in your lineups for sure.
He's in the circle of trust with Rodgers. I mean, that really is all it takes. Because
it's funny.
I'll
give you this anecdote. When Tunyon, I can't remember how the Packers acquired him, if he was a UDFA or if he was a late round pick, but the first time Tunyon walked into the Packers facility, Aaron Rodgers was there, and he walked up to him, shook his hand, greeted him. And he said, "Hey, I'm Aaron Rodgers. Good to meet you." And he's like, "Hey, I'm Robert Tunyon." And then there's, I can't remember who the other player was walking through, but it was another offensive player. and they waved hi to Aaron Rodgers, like, hey, good to see you. And he's like, this is Bobby Tunyon. And he referred to him as Bobby from then on out. And Tunyon was like, wow, Aaron Rodgers just met me. He's already never referred to myself as Bobby in my whole life, but Aaron Rodgers is, so I might have to start going with Bobby Tunyon.
Right.
Yeah. So it's clear that Rodgers trusts him. And it's also clear that Rodgers doesn't trust those rookies fully yet. I think he's warming up to Romeo Doubs. I just think Christian Watson hasn't been on the field enough. A lot of the stuff that the Packers are scheming, this has been overlooked too. We heard from not only Aaron Rodgers, but Matt LaFleur after that Sunday night game that they had a ton of packages in for Christian Watson in that game. And then when he goes out with the concussion, they obviously had to pivot and do some other stuff that game that they weren't expecting. So knowing that Watson has rarely played for the Packers this year because of injury, and they had a ton of plays in for him on Sunday Night Football against the best defense in the league, I think that's interesting. And I think if he's out there in any of your leagues, you got to pick him up. And I think like if he's active on Sunday with 6 teams on bye, knowing that the Packers want to get Watson involved. And if that's the case, you should probably want to get him involved as one of your flexes in the FFPC as well.
Well, that would definitely be good to force him the ball, because I know the dynasty owners, they spent first-round picks on Christian Watson, and they haven't seen
buyer's remorse on Christian Watson for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so Darren Waller doesn't look great for him this week. Darren Waller and his Raiders are taking the foundering Raiders. Oh my goodness! And we talked about this in the first hour too. They've been rough this year. They get to play the Jaguars on the road in Jacksonville. Darren, I think I can't remember if I asked Farrell Elliott or Adam Krautwurst this last week. But if Waller misses again, and this is a 1:00 game, so you should have a lot of options at your disposal. Foster Moreau, what do you think about him against the Jaguars if Waller is announced as an inactive at 11:30 a.m. on Sunday?
I would definitely play him. He should be good for 8 to 12 points. He's been getting targets, and so last week he had 12. He's coming off 12 and 7, so yeah, 8 to 10 points, and then even before that, the last game he played was around 9. This is FFPC scoring.
Right.
But still, that's valuable in the wasteland of tight end to get somebody like that. I would definitely fire him up.
Now, are you concerned, because I think that Raiders game last week in New Orleans, that had to be an outlier. I mean, Renfro had a horrible game. Devontae Adams had an historically bad game where they just could not get him the football. I don't know what happened there, but don't you think those are outliers? And then Foster Moreau might be paying the penalty of making sure that they're calling plays to not only get Hunter Renfro involved, but obviously Devontae Adams involved as well.
It could be, but again, because the position is just such a disaster,
it's worth the risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your alternative?
That's what it depends upon.
If you don't have somebody else.
So let's do this. Let's do this, Darren. Let's do an old HSFF hour trope, the old would you rather, right? So would you rather play Foster Moreau at Jacksonville or Will Dissly in Arizona?
I would go Foster Moreau.
Okay. So yep. Foster Moreau or Hunter Henry in New England against the Colts this week.
I would go Foster Moreau. Hunter Henry's been just a disaster this year. It's
he had that one really awesome week where he caught the 2 touchdowns, but then that's been about it. All right. Foster Moreau or Juwan Johnson against the Ravens, and that game is in New Orleans. Which one are you playing?
Wow. It's tough to beat out Taysom Hill as a tight end in New Orleans. I would probably go Juwan Johnson.
And the last one I'll do, Foster Moreau. Again, these are all assuming Waller's out. Foster Moreau or Noah Fant in Arizona, the other Seahawks.
I still go Foster Moreau.
Okay. All right. And I assume Conklin against the Bills. You're going Conklin, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna go recency bias. Like he's back. He's also coming off 2 TDs.
And then when we talk next week, when he has 2 catches for 6 yards, you'll be like,
right.
Bless it. Conklin's done.
I got shafted.
I'm looking at it right now. I apologize, Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com, noted Phillies fan. It does indeed look like the Houston Astros, Christian Javier, and the rest of the Astros have combined on the second no-hitter in World Series history.
That's crazy.
The first combined no-hitter in Major League Baseball history. This is the first time since 1956, when Don Larson threw a perfect game for the New York Yankees, that a team has gone hitless. The World Series will resume. By the way, Tyler Soto pointing this out right now. It was Christian Javier, it was Brian Abreu, Rafael Montero, and Ryan Presley. Combined no-hitter. It's over. The game now, the World Series, it's still in Philly. Is it Philly tomorrow?
Yep.
Philly tomorrow. Okay. All right. So one more in Philly, and then this guarantees a game 6, potentially a game 7. We shall see. Astros and Phillies knotted at 2 games apiece as they will go at it again tomorrow. Off day on Friday. They're back in Houston on Saturday. So hopefully, Matt.
Roy Halladay pitched a perfect game there. It wasn't a World Series.
That wasn't World Series. That was postseason. But this is the first time there's been a no-hitter since Don Larson's perfect game in the World Series. So historic night. This in a
bad way for the Phillies.
For your Phillies, but maybe this just cements, because the Astros are crushing it now. Maybe this just cements a Phillies World Series title coming up this weekend. I don't know. Just guessing.
All bets are off.
Right, exactly. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, Darren, now, did you formulate a FFPC weekly challenge lineup? I don't know if you did or not.
I did.
Okay, perfect.
But
so
I did the slim. I didn't do
okay. I did the full with 12 players. You did the slim with 10 players. So we will come back. We'll analyze each other's lineups, and hopefully we can help our viewers to a free 2023 FFPC main event entry if they enter these, or maybe just a $2,500 payday. Either way, if you can pull that off in week 9, might be the best thing you do, given all the buys this week. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. He's Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. We will be back in 180 seconds for our final segment. Don't go anywhere.
With Fensty and Ronis, presented by FantasyAlarm.com.
The only person, I've said this to you before, who I believe back then, of all those power hitters who truly was clean, Ken Griffey Jr.
I mean, I think so when he got hurt. We'll never know that for sure either.
No, dude.
We've seen guys who were not big take substances.
That's true.
To get busted. So it's not about that always.
I hear you. It's just, don't you think with the way his career kind of went, you would think that he didn't take anything?
I don't think he did, but we'll never know 100%.
I'm going to keep telling myself that he didn't. The one he's my favorite baseball player of all time. In the 1990s, Ron, as a kid, as a 5-year-old kid who plays video games and collected cards, there was no one cooler than Ken Griffey Jr. I still wear my hat backwards because Ken Griffey Jr. did it, and he looked really cool doing that, wearing a backwards baseball cap. Like, he made everything the guy did looked cool. Even the home run in the movie Little Big League, it's acting, it's all, I guess, fake, but even he made that look cool. I mean, Ken Griffey Jr., you're a little bit older than me, but in the 90s, besides Michael Jordan, was there a more loved athlete than Ken Griffey Jr.?
Yeah, no, I love Griffey. He's one of my favorite players ever, from defensively to hitting his swing. And yeah, I would have loved to see what he could have done if he had stayed healthy, the final numbers he'd finished with. So no, I was a huge fan of Ken Griffey, and it's a shame though that all those injuries towards the end of his career just really limited the production he put up, but he still put up elite numbers. He was so fun to watch. So I'm a huge Ken Griffey guy.
And here's the other thing too. So 1994, the season got shortened because of the strike.
Yeah, he finished with 40 homers in 111 games that year, man. And then he had 56 2 years in a row, 97 to 98, and then 48. He had a stretch 4 years in a row, 49, 56, 56, 48, 40. I mean, unbelievable. And then, yeah, once he hit like 31, he started to miss games, 111, 70, 53, 83. So think about that, all those years that he lost, and he still hit 630 home runs, man. Yeah. So if he was clean, he would have been the all-time home run champion. Again, we're all guessing here, but you would think, all right, well, once he got into age 31, 32, that's when the body started breaking out, which is typical, right, for someone who's not using anything. Whereas we saw Barry Bonds just get better with age, and we did not see that with Griffey. So look at look 2001. Where he's 31, he played on. Look at the home runs decline 8, 13, 20, 35, 27, 30, 18, 15 to his age 38 season. Even age 39 in 170 games, he had 19 home runs. So he probably would have definitely been the all-time home run leader had he been able to stay healthy.
Better Sports Network. It's sports talk done better.
We got 25 minutes left in the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. We're going to put them to the best use possible that we know. I am Eric Balfman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, as well as the Fantasy Football Players Championship. My guest co-host tonight is indeed the godfather of all things FFPC. Data-wise, he is Darren Armani. You follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Mojo. Check out his website and subscribe, fantasymojo.com. It is a must when it comes to FFPC play. Now, what we're going to do here on the Bettor Sports Network here for our last segment of the night is number one, tell you that if you want, and you should want to do this, but you should want to be a part of our community. Enjoy live commercial-free content wherever you go on the Bettor Sports Network app. Plus, we stream live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and of course, bettorsports.com. You can see clips of our best moments and interviews, not only on Twitter, but TikTok as well. Instagram, we're on there at Bettor Sports Network. And on YouTube, you just search Bettor Sports Network. You will find us there. A lot of great interviews on demand on those outlets. You know, Darren Rebell from the Action Network. The WWE superstar, The Miz, has been on here. Competitive eater, Randy Santel. Ian Eagle has been on the Bettor Sports Network. Kostaki Economopoulos. I knew I was going to trip over that. Pat Mayo, Emery Hunt, Scott Farrell, Jay Money, Tim Doyle, Nick Costos, Ricky Ricardo, Adnan Verk, Matt Stryker. The list goes on and on and on. A lot of really informed minds giving you the real on fantasy sports, betting, and collectibles here on the Bettor Sports Network. Okay, let's get into it here. The FFPC Weekly Challenge, Darren Armani. This is something that we've been doing almost all season, instituted at the FFPC week 2 or week 3. I can't remember which one. Just $35 can get you in. It's the FFPC world famous playoff challenge format where you can pick one player per team, and that's it. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. You just let these teams, these players ride out through the weekend, and you can cash as much as $2,500 or potentially a 2023 FFPC main event entry where you can play for $1 million next year. And all you have to do is beat 9 players to do it. Seems pretty easy because it is. So make sure you're doing that at myffpc.com, the weekly challenge right on the homepage there. I have formulated a lineup here, 12 players with kickers and defenses. So I did the classic one. Give me your thoughts on this, okay? So at quarterback, I went with Jalen Hurts, who is getting the Texans tomorrow night on Thursday Night Football. Feel pretty good about that. The Chargers are playing Atlanta, so Austin Eckler is my number 1 running back. Good matchup there for him against the Falcons. Should be a positive game script for him. Derrick Henry, fresh off his 200-yard day last week, will go up against the Kansas City Chiefs this week. And you say, well, that's a little nuts here. That should be a shootout type game. Well, I don't know how much shooting out there's going to be, whether it's a hobbled Ryan Tannehill or a rookie Malik Willis. I think the Titans are going to have to lean on Derrick Henry in that game, which is why he makes my team as one of my running backs. Tyreek Hill is not a man. He is an alien. He is going up against the Chicago Bears this week. He's going to feast on that secondary. He's in at wide receiver 1. The best receiver in pro football, Justin Jefferson, is my second wide receiver this week. Justin Jefferson goes to our nation's capital, take on the Washington Commanders. He's a must start, as is Travis Kelce, the number 1 tight end in fantasy football. Love him this week. He is going up against said Titans on Sunday Night Football. I love his matchup. So he's my tight end. Could have gone with a tight end here as one of my 4 flexes. I did not. I went with Stephon Diggs. for the Buffalo Bills, visiting the New York Jets. That matchup between him and Sauce Gardner is going to be interesting. I think Diggs gets the better of it there. So that's why I have him. Cooper Kupp, I mean, what can you say about him? He's hobbled, but he's still going to do, 8 for 110 and a touchdown in his sleep, regardless if it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense or not. So I love him this week. DeAndre Hopkins has been a target hog since he came back. He gets the Seattle Seahawks at home. So I love him. Alvin Kamara, ever since he has come back from injury, he's looked awesome. And obviously the injuries to Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas have made him more integral to the passing game for New Orleans this week. So I have him going, and he is against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football. Also in that game, I have Justin Tucker as my kicker, and the New England Patriots. I like their defense this week, going up against the Sam Ellinger-led Indianapolis Colts in Foxborough. So to recap, Hurts as my quarterback, Eckler, Henry, and Kamara as my running backs, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, and Cooper Kupp at wide receiver, Travis Kelce's the tight end, Justin Tucker at kicker, and the New England Patriots at defense. Your immediate reaction to that, Darren?
You got a lot of chalk.
That's what I was afraid of. And anytime I formulate these lineups, I'm like, God, I feel like everybody's going to have this. And you got to be a little bit different, right? And I just couldn't differentiate.
The Henry pick is different. The Henry pick is definitely different. So, and I haven't seen like the winning lineups in these to get a feel for if what they look like. Did somebody go outlier and been winning with those, or has it been a chalk? Because the leagues are small.
Let me ask you this: what's more chalky, the way I went with Hurts and Diggs, or would it be more chalky to go Josh Allen and AJ Brown instead, since you can only pick one?
I think Hurts and Diggs is way more chalky than Allen and AJ Brown.
So that'd be one I could flip.
Yeah. So I did a flex lineup. So I have what you have, except for the kicker and defense, because the slim option. I got ETN instead of Derrick Henry. We both went with Eckler. And I also went Tyreek Diggs, so that's chalk. Kelsey, you just got to – sometimes, like, it's chalk, but if you don't do it, like, then you're going to eliminate yourself. So Kelsey at tight end is sort of the –
Well, what would be the pivot there? I maybe the pivot is Zach Ertz instead of DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
In fact, you know what? I tell you what, looking at this, like,
you can't go Andrews or Goddard.
No, you can't. For sure not Andrews this week. I don't see that working out. But Ertz against the Seahawks, that could be like the non-chalky thing that you're looking for here, and he could be a target monster. Everybody's probably going to have Hopkins. I don't know how many people are going to have Ertz.
Yeah, probably not a lot. But then, like you said, you can't have Hopkins if you do that.
Right.
I put Amon-Ra St. Brown in there with with Hawkinson gone. He should, see all the targets.
I didn't ask you this. This is my fault. I meant to ask you this in the first hour. With Hawkinson gone, where do those targets go? I mean, is it as simple as St. Brown and Swift?
Swift's hurt, so it's going to be as much St. Brown as
I should say Swift and / Williams, right? Because none of those other receivers get me going in Detroit.
Khalif Raymond is someone to keep an eye on, I think, just to consume some of those targets. Not that he's going to be outstanding, but he's going to be a serviceable player. And he was also picked up. I know I targeted him in a lot of leagues this week. He seemed to be like a good option. Jameson Williams, I don't know when that guy is going to play. He's a guy I faded all year pretty much.
Okay. So did you have him on any redraft teams, Darren?
No.
Okay. So I have him on, I think, 2 teams that I drafted in Kentucky. And then the news came out. This is why I'm a horrible fantasy player, right? The news came out from Dan Campbell himself, a guy who's notoriously very positive about his players, right? And he said last week, it's probably going to be about another month for Jameson Williams, which obviously puts him into either late November, early December. And then he's got to get acclimated to pro football. Right. He missed all of training camp. He's a rookie. I know he's a first-round pick, but he's still a rookie. At what point would he be fantasy viable? Probably not in 2022. So I should cut him, right? No, I still have not been able to quit Jameson Williams, and I probably should have at this point. Would you advise high-stakes fantasy football after you heard Dan Campbell saying that? Like, look, you got to move on. there's got to be a better usage of that roster spot than Jameson Williams.
If you're in a position to make the playoffs and can hold him, I would hold him because he could be a differentiator. Like once you get to the sprint weeks, if he plays,
right,
he's worth a shot. But if you held him this long, you might have just shot yourself in the foot, clogging up your roster with this guy. I hardly drafted him at all, even in best ball. Like I couldn't justify it. Like it always seemed to me like he was going to be a very late season player. And then like you said, once he gets there, he's got to get into the offense. So he might have a last couple of weeks, maybe he'll do something. I don't know, but I kind of faded him.
And it's one of those things, this gets into the game theory aspect of the FFPC national tournaments, right? Because you have obviously a 12-week regular season, then you get the 2-week league playoffs. Then you have this 3-week sprint where it's total points plus whatever you average during the regular season during the year. At that point of the season, and if you're watching this, you're a pretty accomplished fantasy football player. You know that it's important once the buys get behind you. Depth becomes less important, and it's all about the spike week players. And Jameson Williams, to your point, could be a spike week player those last few weeks. My concern is he has missed too much time in his rookie season to be properly acclimated to make those big plays. Does that mean there's no way it happens? No, it does not mean that at all. It means I am bearish on it. I think it's unlikely, but it is possible. And if you're trying to beat out, a couple thousand other teams, Darren, it would probably make sense to try to find a way to keep Jameson Williams on your roster as long as you're not out for these next few weeks.
Right. Now St. Brown was a guy who excelled. I think he was one of the top performing players during those spike week or during the sprint last year.
Absolutely.
He played all year. He emerged. He was on the team contributing, and then it was week 13 that he exploded. And it might have been, I know there's a couple teams in the top 5 of the main event that had him on there, and he was he played a significant impact in bringing him that top 5 position. But again, he was on the team all year. To come out of the blue and do it, I think is going to be tough.
Were you surprised? We never talked about this. Were you surprised that Amon-Ra St. Brown had this big end of the 2021 season and it really didn't springboard him to like the second or even third round of a lot of FFPC drafts? I feel like that was a guy that when I was looking at drafts in July and August, I'm like, why isn't this guy going higher based on how he finished the season? I was surprised by that. Were you?
Let me see where he went. He was going mid 4th round. So that's not bad, but everybody hated Jared Goff. Like, he's a serviceable guy. He's not like Zach Wilson is kind of like bringing everybody else down. He had a good week last week, but in general, he didn't make the receivers better. So, but I think Jared Goff is serviceable enough that like he could support like a player like St. Brown and he could sort of emerge like that. But it might have been Jared Goff. Like people look at the quarterback. But we'll see. But Williams is tough. I'm not even sure what. Let me see what percentage of players are. Yeah, I can see that real quick.
Yeah, you look that up because I think it's interesting because this was a player
88% rostered in main event and football guys. So
you think that drops after tonight with all the buys, or do you think it remains roughly the same?
I don't think so. I think people, they're going to stick it out. I think
Jameson, much like life did in Jurassic Park, Jameson Williams finds a way in the FFPC main event and Football Guys Players Championship. All right, so you got our lineups. Good luck if you're going to enter those in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Take Darren Armani's advice to heart. My lineup probably is pretty chalky, so make sure that you're differentiating a little bit. And you have the classic for me. You got the slim from Darren. Enter that at myffpc.com. A few more start sits here to close the show. I'm going to pick and choose some of these. All right, so we don't get into defenses a whole lot on this program, but if you had the choice, and I already said my defense in the FFPC Weekly Challenge is indeed the Philadelphia Eagles. They get the Houston Texans. They are on the road, but man, that defense is good. The Texans are not. I'm going to play them over the Miami Dolphins, I think is what I had on here. Yeah, Miami Dolphins, who take on the Chicago Bears also on the road. Do you see that the same way, Darren? You're playing the Eagles defense?
Yeah, so I look what the Dolphins have done on the road, and they really have. The defense has done nothing on the road in 4 games. Ravens, Bengals, Jets, and Lions. Their defense hasn't exceeded more than 2 points, so you want to stay away from them when they're on the road. The Dolphins.
Right, and the Eagles defense does not share that, right? I mean,
I mean the Eagles defense, they're a big play defense, so I have them in a lot of leagues because they're really any week at home or on the road they could spike.
We talked about earlier how historically bad the Lions defense has been this season. Is that enough for you to say, yeah, I'm going to play Aaron Rodgers at Ford Field over Tom Brady at home against Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, and the Rams defense?
I went Brady on this. I mean, I mean, that high point total, it's like where's it going to come from? That's really going to be interesting. And maybe it could be on the ground because Rodgers is just, the volume is not there. And Brady has most of his weapons now. Even Julio is back. So I still went Brady. I guess that's a safer call. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what the Packers do here to get those points.
I am too, and here's why. Northeast Wisconsin, the media for the Packers every single week has been saying, why don't you run the football more? Why don't you get Aaron Jones the ball more? And Matt LaFleur has always consistently said, well, we need to find the balance, the right balance on offense. And then this past week, they have one more play passing than running. So it's about as close to 50-50 as you can get without it being exactly 50-50. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, the rest of the Packers, they rushed for over 200 yards against the best rushing defense in the league statistically coming into that game in the Buffalo Bills. He was asked Sunday night after the game, have you found something with this running game? You know, after not running the ball this much in your previous games, you had a lot of success on the ground tonight. Matt LaFleur said something interesting, and I don't know what to make of it, but he still said, you know, I think it's all about, we got to find the right balance. Well, you only had one more passing play you can't get much more balance than that, right? Unless he believes you could go one or two ways. Matt LaFleur has always said that he wants to run the ball more and then doesn't. He'll start off a game where Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon have a lot of success, and then he goes away from that. So he's just used to saying, we need to find that balance, or he just secretly loves to have Aaron Rodgers passing the ball all over the field. I don't know what to make of it. And I think I'm with you, Darren. I'm going to trust my eyes. Packers passing offense downfield is non-existent. Anything that they've been doing successfully has been within that first 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Aaron Jones is a massive weapon. A.J. Dillon, I think, had his best game last week. So I think you're right. I think the Packers could get out to a lead, and then they just are chewing clock with Jones and Dillon. They looked really good. The offensive line run blocking looked really good. And maybe Rodgers is fool's gold this week. And you look at the weapons that Brady has compared to Rodgers. I mean, I like Brady's a lot more than Aaron Rodgers for sure. Let's see. We got time for a couple more here. Michael Carter, the New York Jets running back. He has a game this week. Now he will have James Robinson on for a full week of practice. So consider that here. But Michael Carter is at home against the Buffalo Bills. We thought a really good rushing defense, but they were not good against the Packers on Sunday night. If you had to play him, or if you had to play Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is going to be taking on the Tennessee Titans on Sunday night, who would you play here? Carter is obviously going to be contending with James Robinson. Edwards-Helaire is going to be contending with not only Isaiah Pacheco, but Jerick McKinnon as well.
Right. So the Jets, Carter catches a lot of balls. So I think I'm going to lean towards him, given that they're probably going to be playing catch up against Buffalo. Mm-hmm. So that game script probably favors him. And then, like you said, with Helaire, so Kansas City is an 11.5 point favorite. That kind of smells like Isaiah Pacheco to me. If they build a lead and they need somebody to pound the ball, I think that's going to be Pacheco. So it seems like Carter's probably the better play here for me.
Let's stick with that game. This will be the last one we do here. Juju Smith-Schuster, who is also playing, obviously, the Titans on Sunday Night Football, or Adam Thielen for the surprisingly 6-1 Minnesota Vikings this week, who are playing the Commanders in D.C. You can only play one of these guys, I'm assuming, at like a wide receiver spot or a flex spot in the FFPC main event or Football Guys Players Championship, or just any league, really. Let's assume full PPR. Is Smith-Schuster the right play over Thielen?
I think I would go Juju. I'm not super excited about either of them, but with you figure with Hawkinson coming in, that could ding Thielen a little bit. And the Chiefs are, even if Pacheco ends up running the ball, like they're still going to have to get that lead. So I kind of like Juju there over Thielen.
I lied. Let's do another one here. Same game. Kirk Cousins again against the Commanders on the road, or Geno Smith, a guy I feel like we brought up on this show every single week, and it boggles my mind how well he's doing. But let's face facts. It's a significant amount of the way into the season here. Total on this game's 49.5. The Seahawks are visiting Arizona. Is it Cousins or is it Geno Smith for you this week?
Wow, revenge game for Kirk Cousins going back to Washington.
Yes. I hope RG3's on the call for that game. that would make it. We've come full circle. Sideline reporter Mike Shanahan.
Yeah. That's really close, but I probably will go. I mean, Geno Smith's hot, so.
Does the TJ Hawkinson acquisition shift the needle for you at all with Kirk Cousins?
Not this week. Not that much. So I think that's and football wise, I think that's going to be great for the team. But fantasy wise, I don't know that bumps up Kirk Cousins too much.
You follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Mojo. FantasyMojo.com is where you need to get a subscription, especially if you're playing in the FFPC. Final pitch, Darren, for why all these viewers who enjoyed your analysis tonight, why they need to be signing up at FantasyMojo.com.
Like we said, it's the essential add-on to FFPC leagues if you're playing there. And right now we've got the all the waiver wire info every week, and tournament ownerships are posted every week. We've got leaderboards for all of the best ball tourneys that the FFPC is running. And when we get to the world famous FFPC playoff challenge, we have a lot of content for that. We actually have an optimizer tool, which will help you build lineups for that. And we do ownerships, and it's one of the more popular times of the year for us. I will post on Twitter as soon as we get off the snapshot of the Football Guys waiver bids, and people can see the $1,000 Deion Jackson spend and some of the other things that happened tonight. So that should be interesting.
It's good. It was interesting talking to you, Darren. Don't be a stranger. Certainly appreciate you coming on, man. We'll do this again sometime.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Darren Armani at FantasyMojo.com. Thank you to him. Thank you to Tyler Soto and Sean Engel, our producers tonight. We'll be back at 10/9 Central next Wednesday with Roto Ballers Josh Hayes. He's going to be popping on, and we'll take you all up to the midnight hour. MyFFPC.com for the weekly challenge. Download the Bettor Sports Network app. Front Yard Fantasy is next. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.